Let's start with your take on Bo Bichette's deal / how the lockout isn't really holding back the big stars from big contracts, right? Or not the
Right.
lockout,
I
but the
found it
impending
interesting.
lockout.
Yeah, I found it interesting, Scott, just the idea that he would take a 1 year opt out. And a couple of other players have done that as well. Emai's got one, Michael King's got one. There are a few players, a handful, that have in their deals 1 year opt outs as well as 2 year opt outs in the 3 year deals. So I found that interesting because remember, we have the lockout coming on December 1st. It's a near certainty, of course. Doesn't mean we're going to miss games, but there is the chance in 2027 that part or all of the season will be canceled. I don't believe that's going to happen, but that possibility exists. And yet, Bo Bichette is willing to go back into the market. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, because he's still going to be a young free agent. He'll be the same age next offseason that Kyle Tucker was this offseason. And one of Kyle Tucker's appeals is that he's entering his age 29 season. Also, part of this is if you remember the last lockout back in 23, I believe it was, or 21. I can't remember the year. But what happened right before the lockout was a free agent spending frenzy unlike any we've ever seen before. 1.4 billion was spent in one day as teams were trying to get in under the buzzer, trying to get players under contract before the lockout began. So that too would suggest that it's not going to be a problem for a guy like Bo Bichette. Maybe it's a problem for a lesser free agent, but a guy like Bo, no. And the other part of this, and actually the reason I got thinking about it was a GM mentioned to me last week that it's been difficult to value players with 2 years of control left on the trade market. Difficult because, again, we don't know what 27 is going to look like. So if you're giving up prospects for a guy with 2 years of control, let's use Brendan Donovan as an example. Are you giving up too much because you really only might get 1 year of control or 1+ years? Who knows? And the general consensus I'm getting from people in the game is that while we all understand that a lockout is going to happen, there's a lot of positive momentum with the sport right now, with the industry. And to miss a significant amount of time, even if the owners are hell bent on a salary cap, that would be something that probably is not going to happen. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions on labor because who knows what will happen. But logically speaking, the way the game is right now, record revenues, coming off a great World Series, a better place aesthetically because of the pitch clock, the larger bases, all of the things that have happened in recent years, it would seem to me it would be kind of dumb to start missing games at this point or at 27.
Agreed. Agreed. I was going to ask you about something completely different, but you brought up a point, and I want to ask you about it. It's you said a spending frenzy like we had never seen before the last CBA expired. Is that because that the owners say, man, if we sign these guys to big money, they're going to be a little more hesitant to go to the union and say, hey, I can't miss a whole year. I can't miss part of the year because I'm making big money now. Do you think we'll say the same thing again between the end of the World Series and December 1st when the CBA expires?
I don't remember exactly, AJ, but that is not what fueled it, if I recall correctly. What fueled it was the simple desire to get in under the buzzer, as I said before, and get these players under contract. It wasn't to co-opt them in any way with regard to the negotiations. So I don't see that really being a factor in how this is going to play out. Perhaps the greater factor is teams might be less inclined to do what they did the last time, that crazy spending frenzy that I mentioned, when there is the threat or the possibility of a salary cap. That, I guess, could affect it, but I'm only guessing with that. It seems to me that the same mechanics likely would be in effect.
And my next question is on Bellinger. Everyone's posting, like much like what happened with Kyle Tucker. He's expected to sign soon. Is it soon today? Is it soon this week? Is it soon tomorrow? What do we expect for soon, and what do we expect? Do we even know the teams? And we know Yankees, but there hasn't been much other talk other than the Yankees.
I would say soon means within a week. I would expect it's going to happen within a week. We're getting closer to spring training now, believe it or not. And I would imagine not only does Bellinger want resolution, but the teams involved want resolution as well. Now, the question with a guy like Bellinger who lingers on the market is always, well, what's the rest of the market? Who is in there besides the Yankees? And we know the Yankees offer pretty much 5 years, 160, two opt outs, big signing bonus, all these elements to it, no deferrals. It's seemingly a good offer, but could the Mets jump in? They still need a guy like Bellinger. In fact, I've always thought Bellinger was a better fit for them than Tucker simply because of his defensive ability and versatility. So the Mets certainly, after not getting Tucker, could be in the market for that kind of player. And the Blue Jays were the other big bidder for Tucker, 10 years, $350 million, as first reported by John Heyman. So why wouldn't they, with two outfielders coming off the books at the end of this season, Varsho and Springer, be involved in Bellinger as well? These are fair questions. And I always caution people on my show and on this show when I write that we don't know the full extent of what's going on. And I'm not trying to say there are mystery teams or anything like that, but usually there is more than one team in a market. And if there wasn't in this case, if Bellinger and his agent Scott Boras weren't trying to work things, then he would just take the Yankees deal, I would assume. But apparently they believe there might be something else out there, and who knows what that might be.
Is it possible, when you said the Blue Jays, it made me think, is it possible that they were been loud, like, oh, we're in on Tucker, everybody knows that they're in on Tucker, and all of a sudden they're quietly in on Belly? Or does it normally say, okay, the MO is we hear about the teams that are in on players, and if they're not, then we're not hearing about a certain player like Belly? Because I'm also confused why they wouldn't be in on Belly.
First off, I don't know that they were loud about Tucker. We didn't really hear much about them for the longest time, and they don't talk at all. Actually, clubs don't talk at all about free agents because they're not permitted to under the CBA. They're very careful with that, actually. So it wasn't that. I guess what you're asking, Eric, is it possible that while they wanted Tucker, Bellinger is just as good a fit, or if not a better fit, and yeah, they're right in there too? I would say, why not? Why wouldn't they be? We've seen them active the entire offseason. We've seen them do big things already, and they had a big offer out for Tucker. Bellinger would not require the same kind of contract, of course, but at the same time, I would think, yes, that they're in their swing. I just don't understand why they wouldn't be, for that matter.
Especially with his versatility and a better defender. I guess Tucker's a better hitter, but there's definitely value there for Bellinger. Somebody that doesn't have value, based on what you wrote in your article, from what an executive said, is Zac Gallen, being the exact words I think you wrote were the least attractive free agent among the rejected qualifying offers. Now, that was not your words. It was an executive, correct? Is that something that, okay, so he's in that range where like that pick, that competitive pick is really hurting him? Or is that just like, okay, he's just the last chip to fall?
The point the executive was making was that there is always one or two guys who reject qualifying offers and linger on the market who aren't maybe at the same level as a Juan Soto last year or a Kyle Tucker this year. Guys who are no-brainers to sign and give up draft picks for. Bo Bichette's another one. And most of the other qualifying offer free agents fit into that category. But there is always, it seems in this executive's opinion, a guy or two that kind of get hurt by the system the way it is, hurt by the qualifying offer. Zac Gallen might be one of those players. Now, I say might because we don't know how this is going to turn out, but would it surprise me if Zac Gallen, as a Scott Boras client, made a decision like a number of other Scott Boras clients have made in recent years, from Blake Snell to Matt Chapman to Alex Bregman, and take a shorter deal, go back into the market next year, perhaps, or the year after, without a draft pick attached, and at that point, maybe do better than he would do this offseason. He also had kind of a down year by his standards. He was not great for 4 months. Zac Gallen back to himself the last 2 months. So it seems that that's hurting him as well. But the executive's point was there are guys who get hurt by this. Pivetta was one last year. Pivetta didn't get the deal that he probably wanted. 4 years, $55 million was what it was from the Padres when he rejected the qualifying offer. The qualifying offer seemed to hurt him.
It hurts some guys. It doesn't hurt other guys. It's crazy. That's going to be, listen, we've talked about CBA. That's going to be a big thing in the CBA is the qualifying offer and the draft picks because teams hold it all to, it's a lot. There's going to be so, gosh, this offseason is going to suck, Ken. I'm not going to lie. Just because
next offseason,
next offseason, as the deadline looms and all these things start happening. It's going to be awful, but I don't want to talk about that anymore. Yesterday we had Trent Rosecrans on, and he was talking about the Reds. Obviously, that's his squad. And I said, well, Hunter Green is available. And he said, you didn't hear that from me. I still don't believe it. So you said that the Reds are getting offers for their starting pitchers. Would they really trade one of those starters for prospects?
I'm with Trent. I don't believe that they're necessarily inclined to do that. They're pretty happy with their starting pitching. They consider it the strength of their team. And the only way they would do it is the only way that the Tigers would trade Tarek Skubal, the only way the Brewers will trade Freddie Peralta, all different circumstances. But teams will tell you, we'll do anything as long as it improves us for the short and long term. So are you going to make a deal for Hunter Green that's going to improve you short and long term? Good luck. I don't know that you can. And that goes for the other Red starters as well, Lodolo and Abbott, the entire top group. If they do it and maybe accept younger players back, then they would have to backfill. And the options in free agency to backfill, sign another starter, are starting to dwindle. So I don't necessarily see it happening. And by the way, AJ, getting back to your point about how next offseason is going to be awful, it doesn't have to be awful. The two sides actually can reach an agreement, forge a new collective bargaining agreement before the deadline even comes about on December 1st. This has happened in the past. It happened in 2006. Hasn't happened recently, I know that. But again, it's not, or it shouldn't be, fait accompli. I know it is. Basically, the commissioner has already announced that there's going to be a lockout. I get it. But we accept this as reality when in reality, they can do other things. They can actually make an agreement.
I think they should, because the game is in a good place. Let's get to somebody who was actually traded. Nolan Arenado. It's now come out in your notes column that there were two other teams that were in serious pursuit. Can you rank those two teams, the Athletics and the Padres, and exactly how they were going to deploy Nolan Arenado?
Yes. The Sacramento A's were one of those teams. They were going to use him at third base. And that is a position that they've been trying to fill. What happened in that case was they had a deal in place with the Cardinals, I'm told. And the deal was one in which they were taking on more money than the Diamondbacks ultimately did. Remember, the Diamondbacks are only paying $11 million of the remaining $42 million on Arenado's remaining 2 years. The A's were going to pay more, and in that respect, it was a better deal that the Cardinals would have gotten. But Arenado indicated that he'd rather that they continue negotiating with teams like the Diamondbacks. And the other team that was involved late was the Padres. The Padres wanted Arenado to play first base, and that would have been a position change for him. But this guy's a 10-time Gold Glove winner at third or whatever it is. I would feel comfortable that he could have adapted to first. And the Padres' thought process was, we don't want to really pay any of this. We want the Cardinals to pay the vast, vast majority because they are still looking for a starting pitcher, probably a pitcher with an AAV in the $8 to $12 million range. And that is where they wanted to put more of their money. They still want a bat as well, but based on their actions here and overall, you would think that what they're going to try to do here is get a very inexpensive bat and a pitcher, like I said, in that $8 to $12 million AAV range.
Speaking of pitchers in the 8 to 12 million AAV range, you mentioned Justin Verlander, and I actually saw him on Sunday and talked to him, and he said he's got interest from teams. He just hasn't gotten the right offer, and he's waiting for it. And plus, he's like, hey, if I wait until spring training, someone's going to go down, unfortunately, and then a team that is going to come to him and say, hey, can you do this? So there's offers. I don't know if there's offers out there, but there's definitely interest in Justin Verlander. Are there teams? You mentioned the Orioles, but are there how many teams do you think would be interested? Because I think he's the perfect fit, much like Max Scherzer was for Toronto last year, to go in and help a team put him over the top and get him to the World Series.
I agree with you. And he had a really good second half for the Giants. I know the first half wasn't what he envisioned, but he proved in that second half that he could pitch at a high level, not the old Justin Verlander level, but certainly a high level where he is an above average major league starter. Now, I don't know the exact teams interested. And the reason I wrote about the Orioles, I heard about them, and they are considering, of course, numerous options. And I didn't want to overplay it in what I wrote, and I don't believe that I did. It's not close or anything like that. But Verlander is from Virginia. He knows Mike Elias, the Orioles GM, from his time in Houston, 2017 and 18. And of course, the Orioles are still looking for one more starter. Maybe it's at the top of the market. That's probably their preference. Whether it's one of the great starters available in trade, Skubal, Peralta, if they're actually going to move, or someone like Framber Valdez. But Verlander could represent a fallback for them, much like Chris Bassett or another starter could. So that was one team. There are other teams still looking for starters. The Giants are one, actually. And the Mets, you can go right down the line. I don't know if the Mets would want to go back to Verlander. They're probably aiming higher as well. But do I expect he's going to pitch in 2026? I absolutely do.
As he should. As he should for me, at least.
As he should, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he pitched good. He pitched well in the second half and did some nice things. Remember how bad he was at the start, and he turned it around in the second half.
He did.
So, anyways, we'll see what happens.
Ken, are the Pirates going to spend more money, or are they just going to throw it around and be like, which hat is the baseball under? Oh, same payroll as last year.
Well, they're up a little bit. They're up about $8 million from the end of last season. So
$8 whole million? Wow.
Well, I'm just giving you what is the reality here. Right. And they have acquired Brandon Lau. They have acquired, of course, signed a free agent, Ryan O'Hearn. They would like to do more, yes. And I would expect that they're going to do more. They know, from what I understand, that they still are at least one batch short. And if they get another decent offensive player, I would anticipate that people will see them as a potential wild card contender. That's pretty good. So there are still a lot of hitters available on the market. Obviously, they're limited a little bit in the positions that they can pursue. Third base would certainly be one. But I do expect that they're going to still be active, and we'll see where this ends up. Because if you remember at the start of the offseason, the reason I wrote about this today was going back to the GM meetings. I was hearing that the Pirates and Marlins were signaling to agents that they were going to spend more this offseason than they have in the past. The Pirates certainly have, and they've certainly tried to do even more than they have, and have been rejected in a few cases. The Marlins are, according to Fangraphs numbers, $1 million below where they were at the end of last year. So they really haven't spent, other than on Fairbanks. They've made some interesting moves. So whether that all was just talk or whether there was something more there, in the Pirates case, it wasn't just talk. They made some serious runs at some big players. But in the Marlins case, I'm not so sure.